Hello and welcome to this new tutorial series in which we're going to deconstruct Arturia's B3-V, which is an emulation of one of the most famous electronic instruments of all time, the Hammond organ. Here we've got a preset dedicated to one of my all-time favourite musicians. I grew up listening to The Cat and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Jimmy Smith, absolutely epic albums, and that's just a sound of childhood to me. Now I can't play licks like Jimmy Smith can, well no one can, but you know, it's just an excellent sound. So that's what we're going to deconstruct in this video series. If you enjoy this tutorial, please check out some of my other playlists. I do lots of tutorial deconstructs. I also write my own music in a series called Back on Track. You might want to check those out. And there's also a Patreon link below if you want to help support me and my channel. So today we're going to have a very quick overview of the instrument itself and an examination of the concept of drawbars, which is how organs make sound. But the first thing that you'll note is that all of the notes that I play on my MIDI keyboard are all coming out on the top keyboard up here. These keyboards in Hammond parlance are called manuals, and we'll get into all of the complexity of that later. But suffice to say, as it comes out of the box, the organ is set up in something called multi-mode, where basically it's expecting you to have multiple different instruments communicating on different MIDI channels. And as we'll see shortly, we can actually use that to our advantage to get some pretty cool sounds out of it. But before we jump too far ahead, I want to have a quick talk about the concept of drawbars. And what I'm going to do is load a really simple preset that contains a sound that's quite similar to a sine tone. I'm going to press C3 on the keyboard, and can you see on the spectrum analyzer below we've got one tall peak at about 261 Hertz. That's middle C. That's called the fundamental, and that's because this white slider here, which is called a drawbar, is set to maximum and all of the other drawbars are turned off. So the organ is generating one tone at the fundamental of the key that I've just pressed, which is C3. The idea of drawbars is that you manually add extra harmonics on top. And this collection of drawbars here that I'm drawing around with my mouse up to this point here are all the drawbars assigned to the upper manual or the upper keyboard. So if we remember that 261, near enough 260 Hertz is middle C, and I turn that drawbar off, the one immediately next to it generates a tone at twice that frequency, about 520 Hertz. Add the two together and you're starting to get a more interesting sound. And that's really the concept. The drawbar at the very left extreme is an octave below the fundamental, so that's 130 Hertz or half the fundamental frequency. This second drawbar is a bit fruity. It's the fundamental plus another half, so it's about 390 Hertz. And as we add these extra things in, there is, believe it or not, a black drawbar here. It's almost invisible in the interface. If I zoom in really deep, you can just about make out that there is a control there. It's almost invisible. And you can basically go through the oscilloscope, finding the individual harmonics for each of these drawbars. As we add these things together, we get increasingly interesting tones. The inverted keys at the left-hand side of the keyboard are hardwired preset drawbar configurations. So if I click on any of these keys, you get different drawbar shapes that always get you to exactly those shapes. Now, if I manually override any one of these and change the configuration of the drawbars for this particular manual, the keyboard remembers that that was the last edited configuration of drawbars, and we can get to that with this black key here, the B. So as I'm clicking around these presets, it's always showing me the same stuff. We can always get back to that last edited set. Remember, I turned one drawbar all the way up to maximum. There it is. So it doesn't matter how many presets I click, B remembers my last edited configuration. Let's have those two up there. And again, when I click the B, There they are. So that's the upper manual, all of those drawbars there. Then you've got 2 drawbars for the bass pedals. Now, with the way that my keyboard's currently configured, I can only access the bass pedals by pressing them with the mouse. But that's no good from a demo perspective, so let's figure out how we can get the rest of the organ working. I'm going to press the little settings cog. I'll just drag it out of my way so that we can see everything. So we're in multi-keyboard mode here, which is where it's expecting to receive multiple different commands on different MIDI channels from different musical instruments. If I switch to split mode, I've now got one single keyboard and I get to tell the organ where those splits are. So it's currently configured to F#3. So if I play an F, that's on the lower manual, F# is on the upper manual, and I'll just set the lower register to C2 so that we can get to it on my piddly little keyboard. There's the lowest note that the lower manual is playing, and then we're down into the bass pedals. So now I can start playing with these drawbars to get different tones out of my bass pedals. And finally, this set of drawbars on the right hand side is the lower manual. So here we have basically 2 different organs, lower manual, upper manual. But there's kind of a cool trick you can do. If we go back to multi-mode, so that my entire keyboard is playing the upper manual, but we create a second MIDI track and assign it to MIDI channel 2. If we record arm both of those tracks, Cubase is going to send every one of my keys to both of those keyboards. And now I've got a really thick sound because it's playing both organs at the same time, or both manuals at the same time. Just for kicks, let's bring the bass pedals in. We'll set this track to MIDI channel 3 and record arm all 3 tracks. Obviously you've got a limited range on the bass pedals, but it does sound really cool. Now, in addition to the organ itself sounding pretty awesome, we've also got a thing called a Leslie Rotary speaker attached to this thing. We'll deal with this in greater depth later, but it's worth just hearing how amazing this thing sounds. There it is. Roll up, roll up. In the rest of the series, we'll have a look at all of these other controls that are available to us. Really rich modulation options, fully featured effects bank, tons to go at. Hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you have, please hit the like button. I'll see you for the next one. Thanks a lot for watching.